Hey guys, welcome back. Luke here again with you. Today we'll be following on from yesterday's video on how you can build your own hydrofoil from home. Yesterday we did our filler coat of resin on the top and the bottom of the wings, and today we'll be sanding and drilling our holes for our for our fuselage connection points. So this is actually the last day of work on this foil, so it's really exciting. We are very close to being completed, and you can see that it's got a nice coat of resin now that we did yesterday. I think I'll just give you a couple of quick points for sanding this. So the first step we're going to do is actually sand this up to about 120 grit. So basically we'll be flattening out any drips, any lumps, just making sure it's a nice smooth surface again. Then once we've done that, we're going to drill our holes for our screw connection points. And then once we've done that, we'll come back and we'll fine sand this up to a 600 grit wet and dry. So just like I said, a couple of points for sanding. I've noticed that when people are learning how to sand fiberglass, particularly this final sand of the resin or the hot coat, it's easy to burn through. And so my first tip is, if you see any weave, so once you're sanding, by burn through I mean sand through the resin and start hitting the cloth, okay? If you see any cloth or any weave texture start to come through, stop that area, because sometimes people are accidentally sanding an area more than they think they are. So an example would be, if you're sanding this wingtip area, the sander might be hitting a high point about here, and you're trying to sand this area here, but you keep going like that, and really it's wearing through, and then all of a sudden you're all the way through to wood here accidentally. And so that's what you're looking for. So if you're sanding like this and you see a bit of weave come through, stop sanding that area altogether. You notice that area and say, okay, I must need to put more pressure over here because this is what I'm sanding. So that's basically the tip. The second point is that whenever you do the filler coat, it does run and move, as we already talked about, if it's on a bit of a slope. So you might be able to make out here that right at the very end of the trailing edge, there's a small kicker now, where the resin has sort of run back and then stopped. So areas like that, we are trying to just smooth out and make sure we're coming back to that nice smooth surface. You can see there's some drip marks here. I'm not worried about that. If you were worried about that, we would have done a cut lap and done all, the top and the bottom in 2 separate days, sanded in between, all of that. But I find that I just like to do exactly what we've done, get all the resin on for this filler coat, and then I just sand the whole thing down. So other than that, yeah, pull the tape off the bottom, of course. I've got the same thing for the rear wing. So let's get sanding. Like I said, we're going to sand it up to 120 grit using my random orbital and maybe a bit of hand sanding just to flatten it out. Then we're going to drill our holes and then we'll finish sanding it. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so now that I've taken it to 120 grit, we're going to drill the holes. We're going to be marking them from the connection side, of course, exactly like we've talked about before. So the connection side of the front wing and the connection side of the rear wing, and we're just going to measure them out based on the plans exactly like we did the very first time. So I'm going to sit this down, I'll get the plans out, and let's measure it up. Okay, so the way that I like to mark the center is basically just run a line of tape approximately in the center, just based on the carbon there. And then we're looking to find the center wingtip to wingtip. So we know this wing is got a wingspan of 680. So I'm going to mark it at 340 right there. And then the way I like to just set up my square line, because we need to get it square again, is actually push it against a straight edge. I'm just resting it on that stick to bring it up so it's more flat. Against a straight edge, and then measure in from the wingtips to actually get it parallel to the straight edge. So I actually measure to the edge of the wood. You can see the wood there, not the fiberglass, just in case that distance is slightly different, because it's actually the wood that we set originally. So that's at 15, and that is at, that's pretty much exactly perfect. There we go, 15. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so without moving this, I then just get a square, rest it on against the straight edge, bring it to that line, like that. Just double check that looks good. Might actually just double check here. Come on. There we go, 15. Okay, looks good, and draw the line. Now I actually used the wrong square there because I needed a little extra length, so I'll just extend that line out. Okay, so now we have our center line redrawn on the bottom surface, the connecting surface for the fuselage. Then we can grab the plans and do exactly the same measurement that we had, so 20, then 25, 25, 25, 25. Now again, when we're measuring the 20, we're actually going to be coming from the back of the wood. That's where we measured it originally, so it'll be from the back, the edge of the wood there, not from the back of the fiberglass. So you just need to sight that. So it's right about there, about 4 millimeters in, something like that. And then we're going to go 20, so to 45, to 70, to 95, and to 120. Double check all your measurements. So again, we're going 20 from the back, then we've got 25, 25, 25, 25. And they should be our screw holes. They should be exactly, or very close to the center of our resin filled holes that we've already done. So I'm going to repeat the process for the small wing. So now that I have them both marked, what I like to do is just actually drill these by hand. I've found that drilling them with the drill press doesn't actually help because it's a curved surface here. It sort of moves around anyway. So I prefer to actually set it up how I want it and then drill through just with the cordless drill. I'm using a 6.5 or a 1/4 inch drill bit. This is actually a 1/4 inch, but they're very similar in size. And I like to center punch all of these holes before I start drilling, definitely, because the drill will wander around. I can't find my center punch anywhere, so I've got a big screw here. And so what I'm going to do is basically just punch these. Like that. So now we've got somewhere for the screw to start. And then you want to pay attention, obviously, to making sure that it's nice and straight. Your drill is nice and straight. So up and down. And you can look from the other direction as well. Make sure you're square. All you're basically doing is being square to this surface. nice and slowly through. Same for the next one. And go through. Okay, so there's our first 2 holes drilled. We pull the tape off. And you look in there, you can see, hopefully you can see, but I can definitely see, that's gone all the way through that resin. So it's a really nice hole there now. So the next step will be to countersink these, but I'll drill the big wing. So just setting that up to try and make it as flat as I can. And we have it. So now that we've finished all of our holes, they all look good. They've all gone straight through the center of the composite, so that's excellent. And now it's time to countersink our heads. Get a screw, and then we'll be putting it through the top, obviously, and just countersinking down into this top surface. One thing that I've learned in the past is it's not worth actually over countersinking this. So you don't want the screw of the head to actually go dead flush with the surface of this. The top surface of the foil. And the main reason is that as it starts to come down this slope, it will have more of a countersink at the front and less at the back. And I did think that was a good idea, but what happens is as that screw compresses and as we're using the foil as time goes on, the front of that screw head can start to work its way underneath this fiberglass if you've countersunk it too deep. And what we really want is this screw head to be compressing down onto those layers of fiberglass and holding the whole thing really tight onto the fuselage, and not have the head go under the fiberglass, and then we'll be relying on the wood core really to hold it onto the fuselage. So that's a long way of saying I don't countersink this all the way in. Let the screw head just stick up just very slightly proud. You won't notice it in the performance, like you honestly will not notice the difference, but it will make it a stronger connection point by having that head really compressing down on all of those layers of the fiberglass. And so the way that I do it is I use the same countersinking bit, which again is just a router bit, just to take out most of the bulk, and then I go to the finer countersinking bit just to sort of clean it up. So let's countersink this, and the whole time I'm just doing it by hand as well, just like freehand with the battery drill again, and the whole time I'm just checking the head of the screw. So let's get started. Okay, and now you can see that the head of the screw there, that's sort of what I'm looking for. So just the very thickness of the head itself, just sticking up. You can check all of them, of course. The back ones will have, you can see it's just sort of getting the front there, but the back will obviously have a larger lip where it's on that slope. But other than that, that is enough of a countersink. So I'm going to do, of course, the same thing to the small wing. So really good news, we're up to the very final process of this foil now. So this is time to just final sand this with some wet and dry. So what I've got is 2 different grits. This is 320 wet and dry, and this is 600 wet and dry. I just finished my foils up to 600. I finished my surfboards just up to 320. If you read online, you'll find people have different theories about what grit you should run your foil at. There's all these different ideas about which way you might like which way you might sand it. Maybe you have like a coarser grit on the trailing edge than you do on the leading edge and all this stuff. For me, I just sand it to 600 and that seems to work just fine. So what I've got also is a tub of water with just a squirt of dishwashing liquid in it. And the way that I like to sand it is basically starting with the 320, just sand over the whole thing just by hand, no block or anything like that, just by hand, really rubbing it very smoothly over everything around the leading edge and everything. Then at the same time you're keeping the paper wet, so everything's wet. Go over the entire foil, then start again, same with the 320, do the whole thing again with the 320, so you go over the whole thing twice with 320, and then start with the 600, go over the whole thing twice with 600 as well, and then you'll find that you have a really nice finish. So I've just finished wet and dry and all of that. Everything's really nice and smooth now. And one thing I just wanted to point out, that's when I actually, with the wet and dry, I just soften some of these edges just slightly so it's not completely sharp. You could leave them really sharp. It'll be more, you know, the foil will be more efficient if it's really sharp, but this is a bit softer just in case you kick it, so I just rounded it. It's just a very subtle softness just with the 320. But that is a really nice important step of building or getting a high quality finish on your foil, is actually this wet and dry, and not taking a shortcut there and actually sanding this down until it feels really nice and smooth. So what I'm going to do now is just go and wash it off. So you can just wash it off with water, wipe it down with a rag, and literally the foil wings are then completely done. So there we have it. I've just given them a wash. They look really nice, I think. Really happy with the way that they've come up. So I'm just going to let them dry, and that is it for this video. What we'll be doing next, in the next video, we'll assemble the foil, and I'll just go through a couple of final points. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.